Okay, so now we're going to take a look at designing a commercial project or a commercial building. So we're going to propose a bike shop in a neighborhood in Denver. So to get started with this bike shop, we want to first add a real-world site, track that down, and we can do that very easily in SketchUp by adding a location. So if you look up there on your Google toolbar, we have the Add Location button. When I click on that, it automatically launches the Add Location dialog, where it's kind of a familiar maps interface, and all we need to do is type in 38th and Steel, comma space Denver. So we'll go to 38th and Steel and hit enter. And that's going to drop us right down here in Denver, Colorado. We're at the intersection of 38th and Steel. And then if I back out just a little bit, I can double right click to back out, double left click to zoom in, or you can use your other familiar maps navigation tools over here. If I click and drag, I can pan. So we're going to propose our bike shop goes right in here. There's a new Denver Human Services building just to the north of our site, and then also a school just east of this site. So this seems like something we could propose in right there. Maybe a house would be more suited, but we want to build a commercial building. So we'll click on Select Region, and then let's click and drag and reposition these grips and include only the portion of the site that we want to import. So it's okay to grab plenty of your context surrounding your site. I don't really need much more than what I'm showing here, so that looks good to me. I'm going to click on Grab. When I click on Grab, that's going to import a one-to-one real-world scale snapshot from above. So it's kind of like importing a plan. I can use my tape measure tool, and I can actually measure the width of this lot. You can see it's about 50 feet wide. So this is a really good tool when you're first starting a project. You just want to go to the site and locate that real world site and pull it into SketchUp, and then you can really learn a lot about the site right away. Also, not only have we imported the snapshot, we've also imported the 3D terrain. So up there on your Google toolbar, you can click on Toggle Terrain, and you can see that we can turn that terrain on and off. So here our terrain looks like it's sloping down towards that new site over there, and that is pretty much the case. And we do have the accuracy of this terrain. It's not something you'd want to build off of, but it definitely gives you a really strong idea of what's happening there at the site. So there are techniques for kind of leveling this site out and making it very easy to build a 3D model on. A lot of times I'll just start with the flat snapshot and start drawing on there. We're going to keep our terrain turned on, and then let's go to Window, Components, and open up that component browser. And what we're going to do is search for our SketchUp 101 collection, and I've already built the site. So over here in our components browser, we're going to click on that Google logo and do a search for su101. It stands for SketchUp 101, and hit enter. And this is just a little bit tricky. These are the components in the collection. On the second page, that's where the actual collection is, but this is fine too. This is the contents of our collection. So you can see here that we have the SketchUp 101 bike shop site. So that's the one that we want to import. And this may not be the fourth one over from the top left on your screen. Might be a little bit different. You can just kind of hover around and see the names. Grab SketchUp 101 bike shop site, and when I click on that, it's going to automatically download that model. And because that model is already geolocated, and ours is too, it drops in right where it's supposed to be. So you can see I've created this site that's skirted. This is a term we use for describing a 3D model that's been kind of blended in with the Google Earth terrain. So you can see this site has been skirted, and so it does mesh real nice with that Google Earth terrain. So you can also see we have our sidewalk put in here, and then our entryway, a little mulch bed, and then we have a building footprint. So that's where we're going to start, is we're going to use the rectangle tool and start adding this building footprint in here. So go ahead and zoom in to a view that is strategic for what you're working on. We really want to use that screen space here, and for the time being I can close my component browser and we'll go to our rectangle tool. So activate the rectangle tool up there on your large tool set, and we want to draw two rectangles to fill in this building footprint. I'm going to start in that bottom right corner, click once to start, and then head over to this back left corner and click again to finish. Same thing here on the smaller rectangle. I'll click once to start, go to the back corner, and click again to finish. Now, just like we had described in some of the previous exercises, sometimes it is easier to generate extra geometry and then remove that geometry to create the forms that we want. So that's what we've done here. So we'll use our eraser tool, activate that eraser tool up there on your large tool set, and we can just swipe over these two extra lines that we don't need. So for this operation, I will click and drag and hold that and then let go and swipe both of those edges out of there. Alright, so now we have our building footprint, and we can use our push-pull tool to pull that straight up. So activate your push-pull tool up there on the large tool set. Once again, keep in mind the hot spot of that push-pull tool is right at the tip of the red arrow. I'll click once on this surface, move my cursor to suggest a direction, let go of the mouse, and type in 15 feet, or 15 enter. So I pulled that large rectangle up by 15 feet. Next, I want to pull the smaller mass up by 10 feet. So I click once to start, move my cursor to suggest a direction, let go of the mouse, and I'll type in 10 feet, or 10 enter. So now we've constructed that mass. This is another point about modeling in SketchUp, or really any 3D modeling program. Oftentimes it's much easier to generate the basic mass and then kind of carve out and fill in the details after you've generated that mass. And that is what we're doing here. So if I orbit around to the back, you can see that in the process of creating this model, we've generated some extra geometry. So let's use our eraser tool, and we can swipe out these two extra edges that we don't need. Next, we want to add a parapet wall to the top of each of these roofs. So we're going to use our offset tool. For the first offset, we can just click on the offset tool, hover on the surface. It doesn't really matter where we start. You can see that little red square. That indicates our starting point. For this particular offset, it really doesn't matter. I'll click once to start, move my cursor to suggest a direction, let go of the mouse, and type in 12, enter. So the default units in this model are inches. So when I type in 12, enter, it automatically inputs 12 inches. You can save yourself a lot of time by thinking in terms of inches rather than in terms of feet and inches. So it saves you that extra apostrophe keystroke over there on the other side of the keyboard. Alright, so now that we have our offset here, we can go back to our push-pull tool and then hover right in the middle, click once to start our push-pull, move our cursor to suggest a direction, let go of the mouse, and type in 3 apostrophe enter. So we can push that down by 3 feet. Would have been a little easier too if we just typed 36 enter. That's what I was describing and thinking in terms of inches. So just push that guy down by 3 feet. Now let's do a push-pull, or I'm sorry, let's do an offset on this back roof here. But if we were to just go at this offset with the same strategy as the first one, we would be offsetting these interior edges as well, and that's really not how this roof will be built. So what we want to do is use our selection tool, and we're going to click on the first edge here, this is one that we do want to offset. Hold down Control to add to your selection and add each of these edges to your selection. So we've pre-selected the edges that we want to offset. Now we can go to our offset tool, and this is where it does kind of matter where we start. We want to make sure we choose something along these edges, and I can click once to start, move my cursor to suggest a direction, let go of the mouse, and type in 12, enter. At this point, I can use my push-pull tool and pull this wall up by, let's just say, 12 inches. So I'll type, let me do that step by step with you. We'll click once to start, move the cursor to suggest a direction, and type in 12, enter. So now we've pulled that up by exactly 1 foot. All right, so we're getting there. We've got this building that's starting to come together here, and let's add some materials at this point. So we'll click on our Paint Bucket tool, and that's going to automatically launch our materials browser. So go ahead and click on the drop down to select from your brick and cladding library. So access your brick and cladding library, and then I can just click on this brick antique. When I click on it, it becomes my active material, and now I can click on surfaces in my model to apply that material. So I'll apply my brick material over here. Next, I want to add some siding. And so you can see we also have some brown siding or tan siding. I'm going to go with this white siding. And I choose that because it makes it very easy for us to modify the color. So I'll click on my cladding siding white, and then I'm going to add that to this smaller building mass over here. Next, let's add some gravel to the roof. We'll click on this drop down, and we will select from our ground cover library. And you can see we have some ground cover, rock crush 2-inch, a couple different gravels up here. So let's choose something like this. And now we've got our gravel on the roof. All right, and then one other detail that would be helpful is if we had a top metal cap on top of our parapet walls. But before we pull that up and extrude that metal cap, if we apply a material to this top surface, any geometry generated from that surface will have that material applied to it. So that way we can just apply the material once and then extrude it and not have to go back and click all those extra surfaces. So let me show you how that works. We'll go back to our access our metal collection. So click on that drop down and go to metal, and then the metal rough. That's a pretty good one. We can just paint the top of each of these walls. All right, so now when I extrude that piece up, I'm going to use my push-pull tool. I'll click once to start, move my cursor to suggest a direction, and tap Control or Option on the Mac, and that's going to leave a copy of the starting surface behind. So at this point I can let go of my mouse and type in 4, enter. So I've pulled that cap up by 4 inches. Now notice that the plus sign is still on for our push-pull tool. That means that we are still going to leave a copy of the starting face behind. Another little tip about the push-pull tool is that it has a memory. If I double click on this surface, it will pull it up by the last input of 4 inches. So I position the tip of that red arrow right on that surface and double click. And now it pulls it up by 4 inches. So you can see how these little tips and tricks can really save you a lot of time when you're modeling a lot of geometry. Now, one comment about that metal and also the siding. The siding is pretty bland, and our metal is not exactly matching. So let's click on this house icon. That house icon within our materials browser will show us which materials are in the model. So when I click on that, you can see that now we have all these different mixtures of brick, grass, gravel, siding. So if you double click on a material, such as this cladding siding white, it takes us to our edit tab. And then I can slide my hue, saturation, and lightness bars around, and probably by default you're seeing the color wheel. You want to click on that picker drop down, and I suggest HLS. You can get to the same results from any one of these pickers, but I find that adjusting the hue, saturation, and lightness gives me the control that I want to get to the colors that I want. So HLS, and I can slide this around, and I'm going to pick something a little bit more bold, maybe something yellow. I can drop off the saturation a little bit. So something like that. That's pretty exciting, I suppose. Now, also, this metal doesn't really mesh with what we have going on with the rest of this building. So we can click on our Select tab. You can see that I'm still within my In Model collection. So if I click on that house icon, we're still in our In Model collection. Now, we have our metal rough material. I can double click on that. And here, you can do the same thing. You can slide these bars around and make it different colors. But if I want to get a metal that's going to match this brick, what I can do is use one of these droppers. I can match the color of an object in the model. So what that's going to do is take this color of the brick, kind of average it out, and apply it to this metal. All I need to do is click once on this dropper, and then click on my brick. And you can see now that that metal, it's got a little bit more of a rusty feel to it, so I think that fits a little bit better. And it also seems to work over here with the siding as well. Okay, so now we've added our materials, we've created our forms, added our materials. The building is really coming around here, but now we want to add some serious detail. The best way to add detail is to use components that are already built. So let's close our material browser and check out our components browser under Window Components. So check out under Window Components, and again, run a search for SketchUp 101, just in case you don't still have that up and running. Once you get to 101, let's go to the next page of results. If you click on that forward arrow at the bottom right corner of your components browser, you can see that we actually have a collection, this SketchUp 101 collection. It's the only one that has text on it. It says su101. Click on that guy, and that's what's going to get us into all of our components for this collection. Okay, so the first component we want to add is our bike shop double door. And if I click once on a component in my component browser and then move into my model, and I can hover around and find the midpoint on this front wall, and I'll click to place it. So now we have our double door in there. Nice front door. We also have a single door that I can use for this back wall. So again, I'm just going to kind of zoom in on that guy. You always want to navigate to that view that is strategic for what you're working on, and I'll click to place it there. So don't be afraid to use that mouse, roll that scroll wheel in there, and keep in mind that the focal point of your navigation is whatever you're hovering on. So if I want to hover in on the single door, I put my mouse on the single door and roll the scroll wheel forward. Now, if I roll it backwards and say I want to zoom in on the front door, I put my cursor on the front door and then roll my scroll wheel in. So that works for any of the navigation tools. Whatever your cursor is on will be the focal point of your navigation. So I'll back out just a little bit, and we have a couple of other components we can add. We have this smaller window. Click once on that, move into my model, and click again to finish. Now with this window here, I'm going to actually move it just a little bit over to the left. Let's create a copy and array. So we want to have 3 of these windows equally spaced at 5 feet. So my window is still selected. It's pre-selected. I can click once to pick it up, move my cursor on the red direction, and suggest a direction. Now I'll tap Control, and I've let go of the mouse at this point. Tap Control, type in 5 apostrophe enter, and then without invoking any other commands, I'll type in 2x enter and make 2 copies of that original window. So we can create a copy and array by immediately typing a number followed by X followed by enter. Let's try it again with a bush. We'll go to our bush, click once on that guy to download it, and I'll place that in my model. Now, the bush is pre-selected. I'll click once to pick it up, tap Control or Option on the Mac to toggle that copy command, and I'm going to move this down on the red axis and then click once to finish. Now, without invoking any other commands, I can type in 5 divided by or / enter. And that's going to give me 5 equal divisions with copies filling in between them. So there's 2 types of copy and array. We can make a copy and multiply it like a copy machine, or we can make a copy and then fill in the blanks. Alright, now we have our bushes in there. Maybe we can grab this tree at this point. So we'll just click on the tree and then we can place that in the model. And I might even add another tree over here as well. Alright, then we also have some signs. So we have our bicycle shop sign. I'll click once on that. And then you can see that this component, similar to some of the others, it will reorient itself and glue to surfaces. So that's a pretty convenient feature of components. And I'm going to drop this guy right on the front wall and then maybe just scoot it down using my move copy tool. And let's see, we can also add a repair service sign, and we can drop this guy back here. Now, the bicycle shop, let's personalize it. We can use our 3D text tool to add a name to this. So again, always keep in mind you want to navigate to a view that is strategic for what you're working on. If I'm working on this bicycle shop sign, I don't want to be way zoomed out here. That makes it really difficult to see what I'm doing. So really use your screen real estate there and zoom in on this guy, and I'm going to add Mike's bicycle shop on there. So all I need to do is click on the 3D text tool. The 3D text tool is that A with the shadow behind it up there on your large tool set. When I click on that, it launches a pretty familiar text modifying window. So I'm going to type in capital MIKE''S. You might use your own name if your name isn't too long to fit there, but give it a shot. So my font that's chosen is Century Gothic. You can click on these drop downs. We can choose any of these fonts. I'm going to go with Century Gothic is cool. We can choose our alignment. We do want it filled, and the height, let's make it 8 inches high. We want it to be extruded, just like these letters here, by 1 inch. So all I do is click on place, and then I can drop that 3D text right in there. So that 3D text tool is a great way to add signage and addresses to your SketchUp models. Alright, then let's back out a little bit, and let's keep adding a few more components here. I also have some people included. And if I click on that first woman, and I can click to place her and her child. And so adding scale figures helps to kind of give a sense of how big this building actually is. Now, we also have a bike rack. So you can see this bike rack is kind of an overhead view. I'll click once on that guy, and let's add our bike rack in right here. And then let's add another one over on this side. So I'll click to add it again. and then click to place it in my model. Now let's say that we want to rotate this bike rack by 90 degrees. There is a rotate tool in SketchUp. It requires quite a few clicks and it takes a little bit of getting used to. But the easy way to rotate in SketchUp is using the Move Copy tool. You can actually just hover on a group or component and you can see that we get these red grips that appear on the top. And you can do that for any side. If we were hovering on any side of this, allows us to rotate it. So we're going to hover on the top and click once to start, move our cursor to suggest a direction, and then you can see down there in the bottom right corner of my screen, the measurements dialog box tells me I'm at about 180 degrees. It kind of snaps to it for me too, so I'll click there to finish. So that's how we can easily rotate components in SketchUp. So now that we have this model built, we can close our components browser and let's just zoom to a view where it kind of looks nice here. I'll just get a shot of the sidewalk. I have the building, the trees, the people, and I'm going to go to my selection tool because that Move Copy tool auto selects, and I just want to not have all that flickering going on, so I always default to my selection tool. Now here's one of the real advantages of this Bright Ideas Consultant's default template. Comes preloaded with exterior presentation as well as a number of other of these utility scenes, but if you click on the exterior presentation, it optimizes all settings for exterior views. So now your shadows are turned on. It's going to switch to a style where we have that blue sky in the background. Profiles are adjusted to be ideal for presentation. Now you can see here that our shadows are not exactly in the most ideal spot for this view, because the front of our building is in shade. So we can go to Window Shadows, and keep in mind that in the process of geolocating this model, of adding a location, we've imported the one-to-one real-world aerial view as well as the topography, and we've also added an exact latitude, longitude, and north arrow to this model. So what that means is that all of our shadows are extremely accurate in SketchUp. So you can generate some really quick and easy shadow studies by using these geolocation settings and importing that site or adding a location. So let's adjust our shadows. And adjusting our shadows, this is really just sliding the time of day. So if we move it over to the morning, you can see that at this site at 8:38 a.m. on June 19th, this is what the shadows are going to look like. Very, very accurate based on all of those parameters. So we can slide this over to the morning. You can also adjust some of the lightness and darkness, kind of like the contrast. Get your shadows darkened up if you like them that way. And once you find these shadows, the setting that you like, you can right click on this exterior presentation tab and choose Update. And so that way, if I want to snap back to my Work tab, which optimizes all settings for fast and efficient modeling, you can see now all my shadows are turned off, my profiles are turned off. I can get in and work by using my Bright Ideas Consultant's Work tab. And then if I find a view that I'm curious what that's going to look like, I'll just click on that BIC exterior presentation, and now my shadows have been saved, so I can get back to that ideal view. Okay, so let's click on BIC Work and get back to that ideal working parameters there, working settings. We can close our shadow settings. Now, one other huge advantage of just working in SketchUp in general that comes along with this Add Location feature, it's the ability to view our model in Google Earth. So, with one click of a button, we can send our geolocated models from SketchUp into Google Earth where there is extremely accurate terrain. There's 3D buildings, all of the aerial imagery. So we get a lot of really useful information. We can basically view our designs in the context of the real world by sending it to Google Earth. So I'm going to do just that. Up here on our Google toolbar, we can click on Preview Model in Google Earth. When I click on that, it's going to automatically generate a KML file and send this model to Google Earth. Now you can see we're floating from outer space down to Denver. And you can see the mountains popping up in the background, and then you'll start to see Denver loading up because almost all of the major cities are already modeled in Google Earth. So if I just kind of slide over here a little bit, and there you can see Denver in the background, all of those buildings loading up. You can see our particular design, and some of the terrain and the buildings still have a little bit of loading to do. But once they're in there, the great thing is you can actually fly around your model and trace your path or record your path, and it makes it really easy to send out some HD video that looks just very, very professional. So you can get some really cool presentation materials out of Google Earth. Just one click of a button there to send your model in and view it in the context of the real world. All right, so that wraps up our bike shop exercise. I'm going to close out of this window here. We don't need to save that model in Google Earth necessarily, but let's go ahead and choose File and Save, and let's save this model to our desktop temp folder, and we'll call this one BIC_bike shop. Never know when this model might come in handy, and remember that temp folder, anything that's stored in there, it's intended to be deleted eventually. So if this is something you want to hang on to, you might create a project folder and store it in there. So please click on that next link there to move on to the next section of SketchUp 101. Thank you.